Are you drowning in workbooks and wondering if your child will ever love reading? Do you worry that your kindergartner isn't reading yet while your neighbor's child is devouring chapter books? Or maybe you're trying to figure out how to fit spelling, grammar, reading, and writing into your already packed day. Well, you're in the right place, because today we're tackling homeschool language arts, a subject that doesn't have to be complicated or tear-inducing. If we haven't met, I'm Kim with Not Consumed Ministries. We help families grow in faith so that they can live not consumed by life. Today, I want to share with you a practical approach to homeschool language arts from kindergarten to 12th grade, along with some tips and curriculum recommendations that I've discovered along the way. Before we start, there's one thing you absolutely must know. The national average for learning to read is age 8. Did you catch that? Age 8. I meet so many kindergarten and first grade parents in absolute panic because their child isn't reading fluently yet. But here's the truth. It harms nothing if they don't learn to read until 3rd grade or even 5th grade. Your homeschool isn't a factory, and your child can learn at their own pace. I know homeschool language arts can feel overwhelming with all of its different components. You've got reading and writing and grammar and spelling and comprehension. It's a lot. But I'm going to show you how to break it down into manageable pieces and keep a healthy perspective along the way. First, why do we teach language arts? Before we can get to the practical side of things, we need to talk about our why. For much of American education history, reading has been considered the most important subject, and rightfully so. If you can't read well, you can't fill out a job application, read signs in the grocery store, or navigate from one place to another. But here's something we often forget. American children were originally taught to read for one reason only, to be able to read the Bible. Of course, our kids have much more to read than the Bible these days, but I believe the primary purpose should still be to help our kids learn to read so that they can read God's Word themselves. In my homeschool, the purpose of language arts is to help children become literate Christians, able to discern God's truth and share it with others. When I keep this as my primary purpose, it relieves the pressure of feeling like my children should perform at a certain pace. It also helps me motivate them to learn. So what exactly is language arts? Many homeschooling parents are confused about the term language arts. Is reading the same thing as language arts? What parts are needed? And how do all these things fit together? Language arts is simply the overall term used to describe the entire process of becoming literate, learning to read and write. This includes reading, writing, grammar, comprehension, spelling, and critically analyzing text. The important thing to remember is that all of these parts have the same goal: to help your children become literate. The main focus of language arts is learning to read and write. The other parts are a support structure for these two pieces. So keep that in mind when you're purchasing curriculum. Sometimes we get so enthusiastic about this that we have 25 workbooks and a first grader in tears. That's not where we want to be. Let me share some tips I've learned while teaching language arts in our homeschool. First, remember that reading and math are your core subjects in elementary. If your child is struggling with reading, it's okay to put other subjects on the back burner for a while. Until your children can read fluently, focus your time and energy on sharpening this skill. If reading is a struggle, every other subject just becomes a reminder of the struggle. Second, don't rush the process. Many parents panic when their young child isn't reading at the same pace as others. Remember what I told you at the beginning. Age 8 is the national average for reading proficiency. Some kids aren't ready until later, and that's perfectly fine in a homeschool setting. Keep reading to them, keep making it fun, and be patient. Third, integrate language arts naturally when possible. Reading great books together, discussing stories, keeping simple journals, and having meaningful conversations all build language skills without formal lesson plans. This is especially important for younger kids. Fourth, as your child grows, remember that reading skills develop so that they can learn through reading. Once a child reads fluently, you probably don't need a separate curriculum to teach the subject. Instead, focus on comprehension and critical thinking through quality literature. Keep writing fun and informal in the early years. Before 4th grade, writing should be enjoyable. Let your kids keep journals and write stories, or respond to books they've read without worrying too much about spelling and grammar. That's going to come later. Let's break it down by age. For young children who are just learning to read, I recommend focusing exclusively on reading. Don't worry about formal grammar or spelling programs just yet. Spend 10 or 15 minutes daily on systematic reading instruction, then practice with leveled books. We love beginnings for this task. It's a gentle approach that combines phonics, phonemic awareness, and sight words to teach kids letters and sounds. The lessons are engaging, include hands-on activities, and incorporate Bible lessons throughout. Once your child completes beginnings, they can move to connections, which guides them to reading fluency. I'll drop a link to these in the description. Once kids are fluent readers, we move on to the reading journal. This curriculum allows kids to pick the books they want to read while still developing literacy skills and comprehension. Each day, students do a 10 to 15 minute half-page activity on a book of their choice. This can be a whole book or even just a chapter or portion of the book. For spelling in the early years, we don't use a formal curriculum. Teaching reading through a systematic approach like beginnings essentially teaches spelling as well. Around 3rd grade, we move to a more structured spelling program like IEW's Phonetic Zoo. For grammar in the elementary years, keep it simple and natural. Focus on basics like complete sentences and subject-verb agreement as they come up in conversation. There's no need for a formal grammar workbooks until at least 4th grade. And finally, for writing in elementary school, keep it informal and fun. Let your kids keep journals, write stories, and respond to books they read. Don't stress about spelling and grammar at this point. Focus on developing a love for putting thoughts on paper. Now, I've got a full video on teaching writing that I'll link in the description. By middle school, your child should be reading fluently, which means they can learn through reading rather than just learning to read. At this stage, we're still using the reading journal as our core curriculum. Students still get to choose their own books, but the journal becomes a bit more advanced as it's focused on entire books instead of picture books or shorter content. Students read 6 to 8 books per year and have follow-up activities for each book in the journal. Around 6th grade, I like to introduce formal grammar. We love easy grammar because it's exactly what the name suggests. Easy. The goal is simple, short assignments that help teach concepts that will make your kids better writers. Typically, my students have grammar as a subject for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and then they integrate it into high school with no separate subject needed. For spelling, we can continue with Phonetic Zoo through middle school if the student is still working on the levels. Once the CDs are mastered, though, spelling is no longer a separate subject in our homeschool. Each of my kids have been very different as to what age they were when they finished working through the CDs. As your child enters high school, they'll likely need 4 language arts credits for graduation. This is where all of the components, reading, grammar, and writing, come together. You don't need separate curriculum pieces for each component. That would be overwhelming. For 9th and 10th grade, we use the high school reading journal. This full year curriculum is much like the middle school journal, but a little bit more advanced. Students still select 6 to 8 books, fiction or nonfiction, of their choice, and then complete the journal pages, continuing to develop comprehension and analytical skills. We usually choose a theme for fiction books like American literature, British literature, or you can even do general literature if you don't want to go that narrow. I have a full video on high school curriculum that I'll link in the description if you want to dig a little bit deeper into that. In the 11th grade, we do creative writing. The In Your Own Words journal takes traditional forms of poetry and prose, teaching literary devices while maintaining an enjoyable atmosphere. This works for both the enthusiastic writers and some of those reluctant students. For your senior year, I recommend In Other Words, which teaches practical writing skills your student will need after graduation. Resumes, professional emails, reviews, and more. These are the real-world writing skills that serve them well beyond high school. Okay, that's all for language arts. I hope you were encouraged and found some practical tips to help your homeschool journey. Remember, language arts doesn't have to be complicated or overwhelming. Keep your focus on developing lifelong readers who can discern truth and communicate effectively. Be patient with the process, especially in the early years, and don't compare your child's timeline to others. Most importantly, remember why we teach language arts in the first place, so our children can read God's word for themselves and effectively share his truth with others. If you found this helpful, please share it with a friend. That would mean a lot to me. And subscribe so you can join me in the next video where we will talk about teaching history. Friend, you don't have to have an English major to give your children a great language arts education. You've got this, and I'm cheering you on.